Picking where an expansion takes place is one of the most important decisions of the expansion. One thing I really like about the World of Warcraft franchise is that we can always kind of explore a lot of different territory. And we iterated through a lot of different locations. We thought about a lot of different settings that we could try. We thought about doing it in present-day Outland and adding new land masses, doing it on Azeroth. We thought of all kinds of variants. And one idea we kept coming back to was doing it on Draenor, as it was, 30 years ago.
What excites me the most about Draenor is that it allows us as designers, as developers, to answer the unanswered, the questions that Outland left in the minds of players.
When you played through Outland previously, you got to see a lot of what happened to Draenor after the Burning Legion came to it, after they tore it apart. But there's fantasies that have existed there for a long time that we've seen played out in the RTSs previously, of the old orc clans in their prime.
It's this very important place in Warcraft lore that we haven't really seen in-game. It's not like Azeroth, where there's kingdoms upon kingdoms upon kingdoms for thousands of years back. It's so important. It's where the ogres come from. It's where the orcs came from. It's where the Draenei had a civilization. It's something that you really haven't seen in-game yet. This is a primal land, a land of giants. It's not a tamed world, it's a savage world. And that's the kind of place where you can have really exciting heroic adventures.
I think the biggest thing about Draenor that's exciting to me is the fact that we get to see the original orc clans. I think it's something that people have questioned the whole time they've been playing WoW. We've always seen little tidbits of maybe the Frostwolf clan could have been like this, like with Thrall and things like that, but we've never got to see where do they live, what was their life like. And I think that's really the most exciting aspect to explore, and then kind of integrating that into the gameplay across the whole game.
What excites me more than anything else about Draenor is being able to go back and see these orc civilizations as they were before all went to hell with the First and Second Wars. The orcs are kind of a big part of the heart and soul of what Warcraft is. And now we actually get to see them in their native form and see these distinct orc clans.
It's time for us to go back to a primal Warcraft, and the orc theme with Draenor really helps represent that. It's an orcs versus Azeroth, orcs versus humans. It's that orc invasion that started it all across the Dark Portal, and we're doing it again, but on a massive scale.
It's really nice to get back to something that really feels like it's the core of Warcraft. It's hard to imagine something more core than getting to see, really epic characters.
You get to interact with some of the most notable characters in Warcraft history. Gul'dan, Ner'zhul, who, of course, in Warcraft lore eventually becomes the Lich King. Durotan, Grommash Hellscream, a lot of these guys that, unless you played some of the early RTSs, you've really never gotten to experience at all.
So when it comes to the questing, actually being able to represent those orc hordes and see them with all their biggest, baddest leaders in their prime, it's exciting. It's something players, I think, have wanted for a really long time. It's something we're really excited to show.
The other thing that's really cool is just the fact that we get to go back to a place that we've been to before, but see everything that was there originally.
That we're going back to a pristine world before Burning Crusade, so we can reimagine this other world outside of Azeroth before anything happened. We can look at Karabor and see what that look at Taladar and see how that went. It gives us a chance to revisit these worlds in a totally new way.
There's a mystery there. There's a story to be told that we left unanswered with Outland, and I feel like this is our chance to show the world what this planet was whole.
I think you'll know in the first few minutes of gameplay what sets this apart. It's going to look better. It's going to look like nothing we've done before. This is a completely reimagined world. It's outside of Azeroth, so almost anything goes. I want people to be awestruck by the environments, because every new expansion is a new opportunity to push the limits of our game.
WoW is a game that has increasingly gotten better from a artistic standpoint. Our engine's gotten better. We've been able to support more things environmentally. But in 10 years, we have yet to do anything with the character models.
The biggest challenge we faced with up-resing the characters was probably just the metric ton of work that it is to actually do it. I think it just became daunting. It's why we've been talking about it for so many years. You know, we've mentioned it's something we really wanted to do, but we also didn't want to overpromise and underdeliver on it.
If we were just making these from scratch, as in, you know, make a new game and just make these character models and put them in, we're done. And I think a lot of people think that is kind of how it is, but there's definitely a lot more to it than that.
The goal behind changing the character models was to upgrade the quality level of those models to reach the fidelity that we have in the rest of the game today. The quality of the environments of the game have really gone up over time with each expansion. You know, we're at the point now where if you put assets that we create now up against the ones that we had 10 years ago, they look pretty dramatically different in terms of just the quality. While the style is very similar, the quality's gone up quite a bit.
The number one goal with the model updates was to really keep the spirit of the original character models. And I think it's sometimes hard for people to understand what that means because they just want to see, you know, high-res art, better textures, more polygons. And yes, that's a big part of it. But the other part of it is to make sure when you log in and you're looking at your brand new Tauren, that Tauren still feels just like the Tauren you might have played for these last, 9 years.
The new models were a challenge. We reviewed the old models, compared them with the new ones, and we wanted to retain what existed on the old animations. We didn't want to stray away from that, so we really worked hard on keeping the personality and the spirit that the old animations had.
It's very important that we don't separate the player, that this new model feels like something totally different. We want it to feel awesome, for sure, but we still want it to have the dance that you love, the same animations you love, all those little things that make it feel like your character. It was very important to keep those during the upgrade process.
We're trying to do what probably no other MMO has really pulled off successfully, in that we want to create a new set of character models that really retain the soul of the original. And some of that is through animation. In fact, a lot of it is through animation. The characters need to move the same way. They need to express themselves in very similar kinds of ways.
If you think of character development as building a marionette, the modeler would carve the pieces out of wood. The texture artist would probably paint the pieces. The rigger would use little wiring and little strings to create a marionette out of it. And then the animator would pull the strings to make the marionette dance. This probably started back when we redid Thrall in Cataclysm. We needed to give him a lot more emotion than the previous iterations. That eventually led us to do the panda, which then was able to do all these other emotive things.
We kind of set a standard with the Pandaren for Mists of Pandaria, and we wanted to bring that to all the classic races.
Rigging the face was a problem. It was a big one, because even though we have a full set of animators, they couldn't potentially be animating the same things over and over again. So we needed a rig that knew what a smile meant for, say, the Tauren and the human, even though they're completely different. And so when the animator dialed up the smile, they would both smile, one right for the Tauren, one right for the human.
With the new models, we obviously have a much higher poly count now than we did in the past. So because we had hundreds of polygons in the old models, and now we have thousands of polygons, we really needed to kind of up our game with the rigs.
Upping that poly count is like tremendous. It does so much. All the hairs have way increased poly counts. The skeletons for animation have way more bones.
Because you have this higher poly count, you now have to drive deformations that need to look a lot better than they used to because you had fewer polygons. So these new rigs have a lot of great extra controls that we can kind of use to our advantage. You know, we're able to achieve expressions now, which we really weren't able to in the old versions of WoW. The old animations didn't pour exactly one-to-one to the new models because the new models have way more interactive hairstyles. The dwarf male's beard used to be skinned in with the rest of his spine. So when you would rotate him, his beard would kind of stay with him. But now we have like a fully functional beard.
I don't think we realized originally, we thought, oh, we just go in and up-res these guys and we'll do each one. But then you start to look at each animation doesn't work anymore because now that we've added braids of hair to the beards, they need bones. Those bones need to be animated, and they need to be animated for every single animation that character has.
One of the big things that we talk about is bones or joints. And what that means is how many articulation points exist in the body. We have, in the human body, over 200 bones. In Thrall, we had somewhere like 60 to 70 bones, which is roughly about 65 to 67 articulation points. In the panda, we had 160 bones, which means about that many articulation points. So if you think of the body not having enough articulation points, you get a little robotic, which is what happens to Thrall. But the panda gets a lot more fluid because he has all those places where he can articulate.
All of our characters are rigged with joints, and those joints are children of each other. Every sequential joint is parented to the joint before it. Instead of moving one controller, you move several controllers to get kind of a smoother curve.
We had to be able to optimize the engine to the point where they're able to actually deal with everybody being at the same fidelity level that we had for the Pandarans. There's like facial animation that happens. There's an insane amount of triangles and bones for a game like WoW, and that takes a lot of work to be able to deal with that on the engine side.
We really felt like it was time. The world needed this. Our fans needed this. We've wanted to do this for a while, but this is the time to do it.
I think right now what you're seeing is us finally getting to that point where we're able to get everything done, deliver on those promises, and give people those updated models they've been looking for.
It feels like we're making a new game, which is awesome. It's a big challenge to overhaul all of these characters, but I think everyone's going to be really happy. They look really great.
The original idea from Garrison's came from actually the farm in Pandaria is really kind of the seed of what set it for us. The farm was a unique thing in Pandaria where you could kind of not exactly own that place, but I think a lot of people considered it theirs. It became very popular. And we kind of saw that attachment people were having, and our thought was generally, how can we expand upon that? How can we take that and turn it into something that feels Warcraft?
When we think about housing in traditional MMOs, a lot of times we think about these instanced off places that aren't really part of the world, or we think about places that don't really have a lot of gameplay associated with them. And those were things that we felt like didn't feel right for World of Warcraft. As we continued to iterate on this idea, we came to this conclusion that what would feel more like housing for World of Warcraft than the idea of building a Warcraft base and having it perform similar functions, but inside World of Warcraft.
Garrisons is a feature that has me extremely excited about the expansion. I feel like as we are integrating our world into Garrisons and Garrisons back out into the world, we're actually seeing the metagame, the playstyle of even normal questing changing.
Right from an early point in your experience with Warlords of Draenor, you're going to be introduced to the place where you're going to be able to found your garrison location. And once you really lay down those roots, you're going to be able to quickly start building buildings and collecting followers that are really going to help you through the entire level up experience and also in the end game.
The concept here was to not just create something that looked pretty and felt like your traditional housing. We wanted to do something that would give WoW itself a fresh spin. Historically, we've always kind of had a capital city. You know, you log in, you log out at your capital city. We really want the Garrison to feel like that place. You can really claim it as your own. We didn't want it to feel like, oh, I built this building and it just looks really pretty. The goal was, what does that building do for me? Does that building give me a bonus somewhere in the world? Does that building give me a bonus somewhere in my garrison? It's very customizable. You're going to be able to pick what buildings you want, where those buildings go. You get to pick specializations for those buildings, which will give them like individual abilities. So it's kind of neat because every garrison will feel a little bit different, right? Not everyone's going to have the exact same thing.
When we first started to come up with the garrisons, we wanted to take the player kind of down memory lane. So we did look at some of the original WoW structures. When we started working on it and infusing that, we realized we couldn't just give the player an older asset with a new coat of paint. So we started tweaking it, looking at the silhouettes and adjusting the design so that we can infuse something newer into those assets. For the human alliance structures, we looked at old castles and old English structures. And for the Horde, they're just their own unique design and style.
Garrisons is a very large undertaking, and it naturally, as a result, you'd expect to find there's going to be a few places where there's just challenges we didn't expect. A lot of the personal housing implementations you've seen before, you end up feeling crowded, or you don't end up feeling like there's something special, and we don't want to do that. We're World of Warcraft. We make awesome stuff. So we introduced some new technologies. We call it seamless instancing. We'd experimented with it before, but here is where it really starting to shine.
The seamless instancing is born out of the same technology that we used in Mr. Pandaria to bring cross-realm zones. Typically, when you go to an instance, you're at some location in the game world, and we need to send you to another location in the game world. In order to do that, we need to load all of that data that's going to be in the instance, and we need to get rid of all the data that you had with you. One of the things we're really excited about for Warlords of Draenor is when you ride up to your garrison, you're going to do it without a loading screen, even though you're actually going into instance content, which you're used to seeing when you go into a dungeon.
As you move through the worlds, once you get closer to your garrison, you'll be able to see your garrison from afar. But once you get to the garrison, we spin up a server instance, you go there, and then you're basically playing on your own server.
All of the garrisons exist on the same piece of real estate in the game world on Draenor, even though everyone is going to be able to see their own version of that garrison. How this works is whoever is the party leader at the time is going to have their garrison appear to everybody in the party. If you want to change which garrison you see, you can change the party leader and watch that silhouette of the garrison change. One of the really neat things about going into your friend's garrison is seeing the different choices they made in either recruiting companions to go on missions for them, or to see the choices that they made about which buildings to upgrade and even where to put them.
The whole concept of the garrison is that you get to pick what you're doing along the way. So you get to pick, what buildings do I want, because each building has a different bonus. We have this concept of monuments. So when you earn achievements throughout the game, certain achievements will let you unlock a monument in your garrison. Say you defeated all the hardest raid bosses in the game, we'll give you a huge statue in the garrison that shows that. You can invite your friends over, they can check it out. So it's not only something that's just for you, it's also going to feel like a social place.
So our follower system is a chance for players to find really awesome characters that they meet in a world and get to bring them back and utilize them to send them on missions. There are a lot of different things that we want to do with followers. We'd like followers to be involved both in the defense of your garrison when things attack your garrison and really fulfill that military fantasy. But also, we have an entire mission system where you can level up your followers, you can get them gear, you can give them additional abilities and traits, and these help them get even better on the missions.
You can name them, you can set up their abilities, and you really try to mix and match to get guys that feel right. So aside from the world building kind of side of it, we've also got this great almost little mini game that you can run using the followers and the missions.
When you log in and go to your garrison, you're going to have a list of a bunch of different missions that have showed up that are things like going out and fighting the Horde in a particular area, or rescuing a Draenor town, or anything else across Draenor. You'll be able to send your followers off on these missions, and in some cases, they'll be extensions of the things that you've done out in the world. In some cases, they'll be extensions of the followers' own quest lines and their own desires. And in other cases, it's sort of simple military stuff where you're patrolling around, you're assaulting, you're sieging, you're doing a lot of things as this garrison commander, like you would as a commander in Warcraft 3, without your player actually needing to go out there.
You can kind of have that feeling of, this is my crack squad of guys, and I get to send them on missions, and they bring me loot, and I think that's fun.
Before you may have quested for that awesome green or blue item, now the stakes are higher. Now you're actually doing things in the world to advance your garrison, and your garrison is what's going to help you win this war against the Iron Horde.
It gives you an awesome opportunity for offline progression. Whenever you're not online, things can be happening. You can be progressing your trade skills, you can be progressing your character. And in a number of ways, we want to make it so that this accommodates the player that only wants to log in once for a number of hours every couple of days, and also the player that wants to stay online all the time.
We're doing a brand new AI tech in this expansion. It's really cool. It's called the Brain AI, and it's a very needs-based AI. So what we'll do is we'll create a character. Say he's a blacksmith, and he has certain needs.
The blacksmith really likes being at the anvil working. So he goes to the anvil and works, but every now and then he gets hungry. So he gets up and walks over to the inn and has a beer.
He needs to eat, he needs to talk, he needs to socialize, but all these needs are different weights.
And then he gets tired, so he goes and takes a rest, and then he's like, oh, I need to work again. So he gets up and goes back to work.
It's a way for us to sort of control our AI without having to do advanced scripting and take up a lot of developers' time in writing all these things.
It feels like a town. It feels like a city. It feels vibrant, alive, and active.
Leveling up is something that you're going to do, of course, as a player character in terms of gaining your levels all the way up to level 100, but it's also something that your garrison's going to do.
The garrison itself grows bigger, its walls actually expand, and all the art changes each time to kind of show how it's getting more epic and more epic each time you do it. And you're going to want to do those upgrades because that's the main way that you can build buildings that affect those missions that you're running, and those missions are going to be generating loot for you.
The biggest challenge, I think, with Garrisons was just how massive the feature is. There are so many moving parts with it. A lot of times with a UI design feature, the designers will have an idea of what they want to do, and they'll come to us like, we want to do this feature, how do we make this happen? We really wanted to take inspiration from Hearthstone and really give it a visceral feel, because for a large portion of it, it's all in the UI. There's the building UI, which is, placing your building and, sort of making your mark with your fort. And then there's the mission UI, which has so many moving parts with different followers, and it all interlocks in a massive way. And we're really hoping that it's just an exciting thing to come back to WoW, check in on your Garrison, and we really want to bring to life your followers.
Really, the entire team came together to create the Garrisons. Every single different aspect of game design, whether it's level design or the quests, the encounter team.
It's something that we need engineering support from, a massive amount of art support. We're working very closely with the quest team to make sure that the quests feel integrated.
There's a lot of engineering work that goes into it. We need to be able to deal with it from a server load perspective.
The UI engineers and designers played a huge role in that, of course.
A lot of coordinating between design and art.
There's AI brain technology that we're doing.
The engineers set the foundation for the seamless instancing that we have.
It really is a feature that is touching every core part of the team. It fits the story really well. We come through, we establish a base, we grow that base, the base gets stronger, and eventually we overthrow the Iron Horde using that base. I don't think there's any way the player could feel more involved in the storyline.